Everybody, my name's Amber Furman, and this is the More Than Corporate. Wait a minute. No, it's not. Let's go back. Hey, everybody, my name's Amber Furman, and this is the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast. I know that for the last 300 episodes, you guys have been tuning in and you have been hearing me say, Welcome to the More Than Corporate podcast. So you might be asking yourself, what the hell happened? Well, let me tell you, the podcast changed. I changed. It all changed. And I am so excited to be able to bring you along on the ride and talk about the power of transformation. My name's Amber Furman. This is the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast. Let's dig in. Welcome to the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast, where excuses aren't tolerated and results are earned through authenticity, vulnerability, and a commitment to excellence. My name is Amber Furman, success architect, attorney, and NLP trainer. If you're ready to bitch slap the bully in your brain, overcome the bullshit that holds you back, and design the life and success you've always wanted, then it's time for you to break your bullshit box and step into designing life and success on your terms. Break your bullshit box. Where did this all come from? Let's start there. I was at a networking event maybe 2 years ago. And if you guys have been listening to the podcast for the last 4 years, you have heard me talk about the power of identity and where More Than Corporate came from and the purpose of starting this podcast was in the first place. I was struggling so much with my identity as an attorney. I went back to the times that I had just graduated from law school and I was meeting people for the first time and I was introducing myself, and maybe I was getting back out into the dating scene and they were asking me really hard questions like, what do you like to do in your spare time? And I couldn't tell them. I didn't know, because my entire identity had been wrapped up in being an attorney. And when I started the More Than Corporate podcast, I was stuck in that place. I wanted to talk to people about what that identity crisis was like, because many times we talk and we teach the thing that we need to hear the most. And for me, I needed to be able to understand myself and help other people understand that what we tie our identity up to so many times is the wrong thing. I realized this when it came to being an attorney, because there were moments where I thought that I was no longer going to be able to do it. Now, those moments were completely blown out of proportion in my own mind, but they were just as real to me. And when I thought about not being an attorney anymore, I honestly had questions like, is my family still going to love me? Am I still going to have friends? Are people going to judge me when I walk down the street because I couldn't be an attorney anymore? Fucking ridiculous statements. But because all of my self-worth was tied up in being an attorney, that's where my mind went. Why would anybody want to meet me or know me or spend any time with me if I lose that attorney title? So I started the More Than Corporate podcast, and I dug into conversations with business owners and entrepreneurs who had gone through that identity crisis of thinking you were going to be one thing and becoming something different, and what that path of success looks like. And one of the things that we talked about the most over the last 4 years on the More Than Corporate podcast is the fact that success isn't a destination. It is a journey that we get to dig into. And when we think of it as a destination, that's where we start to run into problems. Because success is a journey, not a destination, success changes. Our definition of success should change. What it is that we want or think we want should change, because we're changing. We can't stay the same our entire life. It doesn't work that way. And neither can this podcast. So you guys have heard me over the last 4 years really dig more into mindset and NLP, and we moved off of the identity piece and we started really digging into the mental and psychological and mindset related things revolving around success. And over, I would say, the last 7 or 8 months, recording content has been really hard for me. And I didn't realize that the reason it was hard for me to record content was because I no longer resonated with the message. The more than corporate identity crisis that I had started this podcast with, that was no longer the message that I was talking about. And the name and the brand and the messaging, there was this incongruence there. And it just felt wrong when I was recording content. For years, I had a book in me that I was trying to get out. I had all of these speaking talks and keynotes that I was trying to get written, and I was doing it from a past version of myself. So fast forward to about almost a year ago now. I was at a networking event. I was talking to somebody new that I had this history of being an attorney, but they also knew me more in the coaching and the NLP and the mindset space. This person was a doctor, a high performing professional. They asked me, or what made you decide to go from being an attorney to being a business coach, a success architect, an NLP trainer, a speaker, all the things that I'm doing now? And I'd been asked this question hundreds of times, and I had always had the well put together answer. I grew, I changed, I had more to give to the world, all of the things that come out when you have time to think about and put together the answer that you're about to give. On this occasion, though, I was exhausted. I was in a new networking group. I'm a huge introvert, so many of you may not know that. I love being around people, but it drains my batteries. I also recharge really quickly. So if you've ever hung out with me in a group of people and I just disappear and then come back 10 or 15 minutes later and I'm all of a sudden rejuvenated, I really just need to put myself in the corner every now and then and be alone, like give myself a timeout because I'm energetically getting depleted. And I was reaching that point at this networking event. So this person walks up to me and says, how did you, or what made you decide that you wanted to go from this high performing profession like being an attorney to what you're doing now and the coaching and the speaking? And what came out was my bullshit box overflowed. And they looked at me and I said, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. My bullshit box overflowed. And I had an emotional breakdown. And through the process of building myself up, I realized that I could help others overcome the same challenges that I had faced. She took that in for a minute. And I also listened to the words that I had said. My bullshit box. I had been speaking up to this point about the power of challenging your identity, the power of making sure that you're not tying your identity to a profession or to one part of you that is external to your individuality. I had preached to people about the dangers of tying your professional accomplishments and your personal success together. That when you define success by an external accomplishment and then you hit it, that we hit this struggle point because the world that we know it has just shattered, right? All of the problems, all the things that we put in our compartmentalization box and carry around, never letting the world see because we know in our model of the world that if we accomplish enough stuff, that the shit in that box isn't going to matter anymore. Something's going to take it away and we're going to be fine. And I operated under that to become an attorney. So I had spoken about that. I had spoken about the dangers of that identity crisis that can happen. I talked about the role that courage and getting out of my comfort zone had in getting me to where I am now. The 24-hour Tough Mudders, the willingness to step into rooms that I didn't necessarily think I belonged in, the willingness to start my first business and then my second business and then my third business. I talked about all of these things. And then I talked about the power of designing your life, right? The success architect side of things, making sure that you have a blueprint and a plan and you know where you're going. And the more that I talked about these things, the more that I realized that there was a glaring hole in what we were discussing, and it was all of our bullshit. Right? You can challenge your identity. You can say that your self-worth and your value comes from one area of your life and that you don't know who you are outside of that area. You can then have these conversations about getting out of your comfort zone and challenging yourself and being willing to do new things and designing your life and making goals and making sure that the things that you're doing are intentional. But if we have all those conversations while you're still holding on to your bullshit, nothing's going to change. I realized that while I had been talking and internally and externally about all of the action steps that we all needed to take and the action steps that I had taken, what I didn't talk about was the bullshit. Where's that bullshit box? So let me introduce you to the bullshit box, and then I'm going to talk about what I see and envision for this podcast. I believe we have two compartments where we put our thoughts and feelings and our emotions in our brain. The first is a compartmentalization box. That's the place that we put all of the trauma that we've experienced, all of the things that we think bring us guilt and shame and hurt. You've heard me talk about this on stage. My compartmentalization box was full of things like the suicides that had happened in my life, the loss of my dad, the funerals that I had gone to as a child, the failed relationship with money, my failed marriage, my broken relationships and broken promises, all the things that I thought made me imperfect. And those went in my compartmentalization box, where I carried all that weight around, believing that that compartmentalization box was going to disappear. We never open our compartmentalization box, because if we open what's in it, then people are going to see, and then they're going to judge us, and then they're not going to want to be around us. At least that's what we tell ourselves. The reality, though, is that everything that's in that compartmentalization box is everything that makes us human. It's everything that makes us relatable and inspirational, and the ability to connect with and motivate and inspire other people. There's this other box in our brain, and that is our bullshit box. It's where we put all of the excuses, the reasons that we can't have everything that we want in life, the reasons that we're not good enough or not strong enough, or we're not able to create what it is that we want to have. And unlike our compartmentalization box that stays sealed and closed and hidden from the public, our bullshit box, we are more than willing to open. We're more than willing to reach into that box and pull out an excuse anytime we see ourselves getting too far out of the circle of comfort that we've created. I believe those boxes need to be switched. I believe that the things that go inside our bullshit box should stay there. That the excuses that we're so willing to call on when we need to be reminded that we're not good enough or not strong enough or not capable, that those should stay hidden away, never able to be accessed. I believe that the compartmentalization box that we guard so much needs to be opened as often as possible when we are in a safe space. It needs to be opened as much as possible when we feel like we can communicate with others the things that we believe make us unlovable, the things that we hold on to thinking that we're the only one that feels that way. That's how we connect with people, is being willing to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable. So what is Break Your Bullshit Box? Break Your Bullshit Box is the concept that once we put those excuses inside our bullshit box, they can never be accessed. It's the reality that when we start to get into those safe spaces and hang out with and create our circle with people who make us feel safe enough to deal with what's in our compartmentalization box, that we can finally break the box that holds our excuses and burn those excuses, get rid of them, destroy them, never to have them come back, because we know they're bullshit, right? That's where this podcast is going. So this is the very, very first episode of the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast formerly known as the More Than Corporate podcast. As we dig into the future of this podcast, I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from you guys on what are those excuses that you have allowed to hold yourself back before. When you think about the reasons that you have not taken steps towards what it is you've always said you wanted, what are those thoughts that hold yourself back? Who do you want to hear from? What interviews do you want to see and hear on this podcast? What topics do you want to have discovered? I'm so excited to dig into this. The book is coming out in August. The coaching programs are launching in August. This is an incredible opportunity to be able to start to finally have conversations about the excuses that we all buy into. And we all have it. When we empty our bullshit box, it just gets filled with new bullshit. And then we get to call that out for what it is, which is bullshit. So I'm going to encourage you guys to start thinking intentionally about what those excuses are. What lies have you been telling yourself about your capabilities? What bullshit have you been buying into that's been keeping you from reaching your full potential? And what do you need to know or learn, or who do you need to connect with to be able to start to shift the stories that you're telling yourself in your head? It is time for you to break your bullshit box. And I am so excited to be along on this journey with you. So continue to tune into the podcast for continued content on what your bullshit box is, different types of excuses that we have, how you can break that and have the life that you have always wanted to have. As always, please reach out to me and let me know what you want to hear, because in order for you to reach the life and the business that you have always wanted, then excuses can't be tolerated and results have to be earned. My name is Amber Fuhriman, and this is the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast.